John Cameron's wages.
Brett Huntley.
David Bracey. John Chancellor.
Out. 4 cabinet secretaries stepped down, including Secretary of State Colin Powell. His likely replacement, National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. Deadly ending, the eyewitness story of a U.S. Marine, a wounded insurgent, and a fatal decision. Can the shooting of an unarmed prisoner ever be justified? What's inside the bottle? A tiny new tracking device knows, but some say while it could help your health, it could hurt your privacy. And mothers of invention. These moms quit their day jobs, and instead of searching for the perfect item, they invented it. And now they're cashing in.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Substituting tonight, Brian Williams.
Good evening. It is very clear tonight that the second Bush administration is going to look quite different from the first, beginning with the men and women around the president. Today, there were another 4 resignations from his first-term cabinet, chief among them Secretary of State Colin Powell. It is a job National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice is widely expected to be named to. Also departing, Energy Secretary Spencer Abraham, Education Secretary Rod Page, and Agriculture Secretary Ann Veneman. We begin tonight with Secretary of State Powell. While his appointment made history, his tenure has not been without conflict. Here is NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell.
She's been at the president's side almost day and night for 4 years. Now officials tell NBC News Mr. Bush wants his national security advisor to oversee a top-to-bottom house cleaning at the State Department. Departing Colin Powell, the most popular member of the cabinet, along with his top deputy, Richard Armitage, also a moderate. Several officials tell NBC News Powell was willing to stay a while longer to cement his choices for key State Department slots, but the president pointedly did not ask him to.
We came to a mutual agreement that it would be appropriate for me to leave at this time.
In fact, sources say Powell's departure after one term, while long planned, fits into a bigger White House strategy to put more hardliners at the State Department. After 4 years of nonstop conflict between Powell and Defense Secretary Rumsfeld.
And this divide in national security foreign policy issues, I think has hurt this administration.
From the beginning, the vice president and defense secretary persuaded the president to overrule Powell on holding direct talks between the U.S. and North Korea, on overtures to Iran, on Powell's desire to pressure Israel to be more flexible with the Palestinians, and most important, on Powell's arguments against the war with Iraq. Now, sources say the president realized he could not let the conflict continue, and the vice president advised that removing Rumsfeld would be interpreted as an admission of failure in Iraq. The most immediate impact of the switch will likely be in the Middle East. Today, after meeting with Israel's foreign minister, Powell was asked if his resignation would hurt chances to restart peace talks after the death of Yasser Arafat.
We're going to keep moving forward. It's the president's policies that are being pursued and implemented, not Colin Powell's.
But the president's Mideast policy is very different from Powell's. Mr. Bush has told people he believes in the ideas of Israeli hardliner Natan Sharansky and has read his new book, which says democracy can take hold in Arab states. Sharansky visited the president for an hour last week and also met with Condoleezza Rice.
Powell's departure is only the first of major foreign policy changes. Officials tell NBC News the president may choose the State Department's hardline weapons expert, John Bolton, to be Deputy Secretary of State. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the State Department.
This now makes 6 announced departures from the Bush cabinet. NBC News White House correspondent David Gregory is with us from the White House tonight with more on all this. David, historically, there's 2 ways of going about this. Some presidents have asked for all the cabinet to resign, then accept or reject the individuals. Sometimes it comes out piecemeal. Has anything about this been a surprise?
It really hasn't. Senior aides say they have been working on a transition since before the election. They identified cabinet secretaries who are likely to leave after a first 4-year term and looked at likely successors. The president really focused on this, his aides say, the first weekend after the election while up at Camp David, looked at the transition plans. The key to him has always been, his aides say, filling those voids very quickly. And if you'll notice the pattern so far, picking people from inside the White House who are very close to him with the expectation that Condoleezza Rice now goes to the State Department and putting them into the cabinet. As to moving quickly, we expect that as early as tomorrow we get Dr. Rice's successor. successor, widely expected to be Stephen Hadley, her current deputy in the NSC, as the odds-on choice to replace her. But another person has also been mentioned, and that is Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Defense Secretary, also on that list, and we could find out the choice there as early as tomorrow, Brian.
How close are we from this process ending? Are there other rumored names to be in the hopper?
Well, a couple of big ones. Tom Ridge, of course, Homeland Security Secretary, came on after the 9/11 attacks. He is expected to resign soon, so we're watching that closely. And then, of course, the other person of great interest is Donald Rumsfeld. And while his close advisors say that he's being deliberately coy about his timetable and decision, he is expected to stay on, his advisors say, for perhaps up to 2 years of a new term, Brian.
NBC News White House correspondent David Gregory from the North Lawn tonight. David, thanks. While all these changes were unfolding today in official Washington in Iraq, the Americans were getting the job done on the ground, all but declaring mission accomplished in Fallujah. 338 U.S. service members have been killed, 320 wounded since the assault began earlier this month. And despite the casualties, as NBC's Jim Miklaszewski reports from the Pentagon, the Americans may soon bring the Fallujah tactics to other hotspots.
After a week-long battle, the Marines declared NBC News, the Pentagon.
We now have a disturbing story to show you tonight. It illustrates how complex and confusing life can be on the front lines of this war. The U.S. Marines are currently investigating what may be, during combat operations in Fallujah, the illegal killing of a wounded, unarmed insurgent inside a mosque. Though NBC News has chosen not to air the most gruesome of the images, the incident you're about to see is still troubling to watch and is raising the question, is there ever a justification for shooting an unarmed enemy? NBC's Kevin Seitz has this exclusive first-hand account of what happened inside that mosque.
These U.S. Marines have had to fight for nearly every inch of ground taken in Fallujah. They've inflicted heavy casualties on insurgents here, but have also suffered many in 5.
By the way, our correspondent Kevin Seitz has been keeping a weblog on the internet of his day-to-day life while covering the war in Iraq. It has generated a loyal readership on the internet. You can access it by linking to it via our website, nightly.msnbc.com. Up next, as we continue this Monday night, NBC News in-depth turmoil at the CIA as a former bin Laden specialist goes public with criticism, and now several high-level officials quit. And later, stay-at-home moms coming up with solutions to their own baby's problems and striking it rich at the very same time. NBC News in depth tonight. Chaos at the CIA. 2 of this nation's top spies resigned today, the latest in a major shakeup at the agency. It's been a turbulent few weeks since the new CIA director Porter Goss took over. Now one of the latest to turn in his papers is the former head of the CIA's bin Laden unit. NBC News senior investigative correspondent Lisa Myers has his surprising parting thoughts.
The CIA officer who led a secret unit to Washington.
Up next here, a novel new way of fighting prescription drug counterfeiting. Tiny radio transmitters on medicine bottles to track them, but in the process, do they track you too?
Now it's his turn. John and Elizabeth Edwards join Katie Couric for an exclusive interview, only on Today on NBC.
This next item sounds like a throwback to the old Cold War days, but it happened today. 43 members of a Cuban dance troupe performing at the Stardust Casino in Las Vegas defected. One of the biggest mass defections of entertainers from a communist nation ever. Cast members of the Havana nightclub show, as it's called, celebrated outside a courthouse after filing for asylum. They said they did it because they'd be forced to quit performing. Now an entry in the What Will They Think Of Next file. Tiny new tracking devices designed to spot counterfeit medications before they make it to your medicine cabinet. Drug companies love the idea, but some critics are skeptical about how this same technology may be used in other ways. The story tonight. The company that makes Viagra has been told to pull 2 television ads, by the way, that have aired often on this broadcast. They are the ones with the voiceover that says, quote, "Remember that guy who used to be called Wild Thing? He's back." Well, the federal government, in a letter to the Pfizer Corporation, said the ads make unproven claims about the return of sexual desire and fail to explain that some patients should not take Viagra. Pfizer tells NBC News it will pull the ads over the next few days. On Wall Street today, stocks closed slightly higher. The Dow was up 11 points. The Nasdaq was up almost 9. Next up, when we continue, mothers who didn't waste time looking for a better mousetrap, they went ahead and built one.
The Nightly Journal, brought to you by Walmart. Always low prices. Always.
What happens when high-energy, super-achieving women in the workforce choose to stay home and raise their children? What happens to all that brain power? Well, increasingly, it's being put right to work to solve the problems that new mothers encounter, proving home is where the profit motive is. Here with tonight's Nightly Journal, NBC's Ann Thompson.
It is said necessity is the mother of it.
And that is Nightly News for this Monday evening. I'm Brian Williams reporting tonight from New York. Tom Brokaw will be back here with you tomorrow night. Good night.
Tonight.
Cameron's crazy.
Huntley, David Brady, John Chancellor. Attention,